Fantastic. So I want a lot of audience engagement. So can I have a show of hands if you've ever ignored an app notification that was supposed to help you? I'm sure it was a lot more than that, actually. Thank you. So we're surrounded by wellness promises, but smart women and men as well, who are stressed out professionals, a lot of them are skeptical. So what makes something actually earn our trust? And we'll start with Suzanne.
It's a great question, and it's been amazing listening today as well to everybody making these fantastic products in this space. And it just makes me think again that majority of wearables, and specifically quite a few of the apps as well, what they're creating is community now for women, but they were not born or they were not created for women from the beginning. And that's what's difficult. So you create a product. We always talk in tech. I come from a very much a tech world. And, I've grown up in that sort of very strong, we focus on the consumer, but the consumer's always male. And in every single product, if you think about it, every tech product you've had, think about it, the iPhone is too big for women's hands in general. So small details like that. And, so you've got user journeys that are being pushed in with menstrual cycle into a product, into a journey, which is actually created for a different user. So here's an interesting one. Hands up, who's got an Oura ring? Okay, there's quite a few. So isn't this interesting? So when we all open our Oura app to check on our sleep, whatever, if you have a partner, if you're a male friend, if he opens his, it's exactly the same. How can that be? We have a cycle. So the cycle is there. It's great to check it. It's great to see your body temperature going up in your different phases and understanding that. But again, it's just sort of it's like a game you play. You just see tracks, but it doesn't actually talk into real life. And what I would really like to start to see, and what I'm really promoting, is this, what I call cycle-aware focus that we need to have, where you start to integrate this into your sleep, into how you should exercise. Like we heard today about what FACE is also focusing on. Imagine you actually have that stimulation into real life and not just a dashboard showing you something which you probably kind of can feel, but that makes it more real. And I spend a lot of my time these days with companies like Boots, who you would know here, also Matus in Denmark, various pharmacies, where I'm actually working on modeling, bringing women's health onto the high street, shall we say. And the whole idea with that is that you can have this moment of truth when you have some testing. And we talked about that earlier, and Chris mentioned it as well. I'm a big fan of testing. But why isn't hormonal tests available on the high street? Why can't you walk into Boots, get a hormonal test? I'm not asking them to be medical, but they have advisors, and Boots, they even claim they have this huge focus on menopause. So this is actually something that I spend a lot of time on in my small consultancy at the moment, working with different pharmacies and how we start to integrate that into that space where women actually come and shop for the family, but also for themselves. But it's to get that data sort of like just sign for them and to get them started.
Kennedy?
Yeah, something that makes a product trustworthy definitely has to do with the data that goes into it. From our perspective right now, a lot of AI tooling that's used for research is based on a black box that's full of white male data. And so decentralizing that research, using things like wearables, apps, or whatever, but decentralized cohort studies to bring more women specifically and more diverse people into clinical trials, making it as easy as possible for them to participate, is really important, and that helps us get those richer data sets that we need to produce more accurate AI algorithms and tooling. And then also the way that your AI works, like just generative AI is going to just tell you what you want to hear next. But if you can actually model multiple systems, like for example, throughout an entire menstrual phase, what you could connect a node of like, oh, this particular like thing during the luteal phase might make you like tired or something like that. So at Rejuve Bio, our platform is centered around is a knowledge metagraph. And so basically you can put tons of data into this knowledge metagraph, and you can query it in a really nice visual way. And it's something that kind of has the power to remove the confounding factor and kind of the excuse of like not using women in trials because they're too complicated. So the data that goes into a product is a lot of what makes it trustworthy.
Thank you. And Jennifer, obviously we've covered the...
I think that you have the two experts on products here.
Fair enough.
I will say that the whole idea that women's bodies are more noisy or that we contribute, that's been completely debunked.
Yeah.
Like lots of data. Males are also noisy.
In a different way.
In a different way.
Yeah.
So, and I'm going to ask the audience after that, so do you have a thing, but what is one feature or product that actually broke through and stuck for you?
I mean, for me, I would say a continuous glucose monitor. That is my favorite product. I mean, like every other woman's story that you've heard today, majority of the people that are doing what they're doing today is because they've been ill. They got sick at some stage, and the medical world said, we don't know what to do with you. I was one of those people. It took me 8 years to cure myself. Spent an awful lot of money on health, on all kinds of biohacking. And I would say 60% of what I did didn't work. That was a waste of money, but still, I'm glad I did it because I can teach others, I can help others now. And 40% definitely was very beneficial, especially epigenetic testing. I'm also a big promoter of that, understanding your hormones in your 30s. I would say even as early as when you're 20, starting to getting a hormone panel, a blood test, just to get ahead of that. But a continuous glucose monitor, for me, was the biggest game changer. And the reason, I don't know hands up, how many of you have worn one of those? Obviously, if you have diabetes, a lot of people wear it all the time. But if you just want to check in on your own blood glucose, and having grown up in South Africa, I have a sweet tooth. We all suffer from that. So, and I can't leave anything sweet alone. So I realized, I had high inflammation in my body, and I had to get that under control. But I also wanted to understand how food was affecting me. But that has been my biggest game changer, because you can see in real life. Now imagine we had that for hormones for women, that you can wear a 2-week period, and you can see that, and it's linked to your blood glucose and everything like that. But to me, I would say that is the product that has been the biggest influencer in my journey.
Mine's going to be relatively simple to that. Monitoring my sleep. I just got an Oura ring for my 40th birthday, and I have not had time to set it up yet. But I will be using that. But we have one of those sleep number beds at home that monitor your sleep, and so I have that as an app. And I have 2 young children at home that are 5 and 8, and so monitoring my sleep for the last I've done it pretty consistently for the last 6-ish years, and so I've got one baby in there in that time frame, and just noticing what it does to my mood, my productivity, just everything. I mean, sleep. Really concentrating on getting quality sleep for me was a game changer, and I've always kind of struggled with that, and actually monitoring that and finding out what behaviors lead to a better night's sleep, that's something that's really been
and actually
good for me.
pairing the two when you put the CGM with something that monitors your sleep together is actually super obvious. I mean, for example, if I've got one bad night's sleep because I've got an early flight or late flight or something's happening, my next day, I mean, obviously I feel like crap, excuse my French, but my insulin sensitivity, no matter what cycle phase I'm on, is through the roof. It doesn't matter if I eat, if I don't eat, what I eat, it just doesn't matter. It's just through the roof. So I need to actually get some proper sleep before things return back to normal.
For sure. Mine is actually related to sleep as well, and I have no connection to this company, but 8 Sleep. So not just monitoring my sleep, but actually optimizing my sleep in a way that I couldn't do on my own, right? It's just it's a mattress topper that essentially measures your body temperature across your whole body, and then you set it to, what the optimal set of temperatures are. So you start at some temperature you're comfortable at, and then your temperature is supposed to drop, so you go into REM sleep. And anyway, there's 4 settings, and it will make these micro adjustments throughout the night. So if your body heats up, it cools down to keep you within a set range. And so your sleep is it's like magic.
And you actually get partnered mats as well.
Oh, yes. And so there's 2, it's controlled by an app,
His
and
and
there are
hers,
2
yeah.
sides. And so my partner sleeps, 6 degrees different from me, and it's totally fine.
No more arguments about the duvet.
Exactly.
Done. Okay. So as I said, questions for the audience. What is one feature or product that actually broke through and stuck with you? Anyone wants to contribute? We should have some mic runners somewhere. Anyone? No? Okay. So they would definitely need to...
Oh, there's one over there.
Oh, yes, sorry. There's a mic coming, 1 second.
Yep, please.
Yes, so for me, Therabody wrap for the belly. I've seen when I was wearing Whoop, I've seen increase in my HRV that was like 100% when I was wearing. But I would just put the belly wrap and wear it for like 4 hours, 5 hours a day while I was working. So it was longer than what they would recommend. So it has infrared and it has also vibrations and heat. So it was really nice.
Okay, so that's worth looking into. Thank you, Nika. So we give women data, but not power. So from wearables to cycle trackers to egg freezing consoles, we're surrounded by data. But most women I know still don't feel in control. Why do you think that is? What is missing between information and agency?
I mean, it's this personalized ecosystems. I think Anna actually touched upon it as well. When you think about it, I always think back, like, where does it actually start? And imagine you grow up as a young girl, you go to your first day in school or your first sort of few years in school. And during those years, you get taught what a powerful body you have, that every 28 days or 31 days, depending on your cycle, you can recreate life. Imagine that's the message we all grew up with. I certainly didn't. I grew up in a society, nobody talked about it. I think they talked 5 minutes in biology at some stage, maybe even less. And every time you had to buy products, they double wrapped it in the pharmacy and you had to walk out and you had to feel very much ashamed. And I had no idea about my cycle, right? So if you look still today, what shocks me is the amount, every time we do research in Europe, I'm not even talking about underdeveloped countries right now. I'm talking about developed, this Western part of the world. It's anything from 37 to 58% of women that don't understand what happens to their bodies during their menstrual cycle. Or not, let's not call it a menstrual cycle, let's just call it their cycle. And they have no idea. They don't have an understanding. And to me, that is still a big problem, because that means it's still an education. So I almost feel like, I know we can talk about work and fix those structures and everything, but to me, this is a school where we get educated. We need to have health as a future subject in school, almost. And we need to get people really understanding that part of their bodies. To me, that would be a real game changer, to actually start to integrate that.
Yeah, I agree 100% with that. I mean, I embarrassingly cannot tell you like how many friends I have, and I have a pretty well-educated group of friends, and my husband has a PhD in medical biology, and I cannot tell you how many people it was very obvious did not truly learn how a menstrual cycle works until they were trying to conceive children. I'm not totally convinced my husband even really knew, and he went to medical school. So it's like, I mean, yeah, so there is this gap between education and power. I think a lot of it has to do with accessibility as well. When you have like getting a good quality education, but then what can you actually do with it? Like, what are the resources that are available from that education? And like Jennifer, I'm also American, obviously, and that's something that's like very quickly eroding wasn't good to begin with in the United States, but it's very quickly eroding. And so, yeah, just making things as accessible as possible, as high quality in terms of education, and we should all understand these bodies we're living in. Like it's a simple thing. Like, I don't know why that's so complicated. So yeah, I think accessibility is another big issue, I think.
Yeah, I would definitely agree with both of you. I think one of the major problems is like you said, doctors. So when women go to their doctors, when I go to my doctor, I fully expect not to have most of my concerns addressed. And it's not because my doctors aren't well trained. It's not because they're not amazing people who are really smart, who are concerned about me and my health. It's because there is literally no information for them to learn. Mm-hmm. So that's the real problem here, right? I mean, I think there are efforts to increase the amount of education that women get about their own bodies, which I think is key. And I think we put a lot of effort towards advocacy and towards policy and towards getting more information about women's health into the first 4 years of the med school curriculum in the US, and also into the training for the people who actually should be taking care of women across their adult lives, who have said they don't feel like they have enough training to take care of women in menopause, which is horrifying. So there's that piece of it, but then there's also just that we genuinely don't know. The reason we don't have, well, aside from the tech, the reason we don't have a continuous hormone monitor is because we wouldn't know what to do with that data. Like, we don't know, we haven't collected the data to look at women's hormones across a cycle. And, the ones that we do monitor, we pick a day, or maybe we pick 2 days. If you're lucky, maybe they'll pick 3 days across your cycle to look at. But your doctor doesn't know what to do with that information because we literally haven't done the studies to know what that means. And so it's so frustrating. So yeah, I think that's why literally every person I know who's a female is
frustrated.
Constantly frustrated.
Is frustrated a banned word as well? Yes, it is actually, okay. So, and this is one thing I'll pass to the audience in a second as well, but what is one health decision where you wished you had less data but better guidance?
Less data, but better guidance. Oh, I don't know.
Anyone? Okay, I'll let you stew on that one. Let me know later if anything comes up. So, you've all seen some very good ideas, and some make it to market, some don't. What is the most promising innovation in women's health that you've seen fail, and what should we learn from that?
I'm looking for the word because I saw that as one of the questions, and I think it's over-gendering. Is that a word in English? I don't know.
It is now.
It is now, but it's when we call it also pinkified, make everything pink, and then it's for a woman, right? But it's really making it so obvious that it's for a woman, and then it doesn't really have a use case, and it's more about the form and not the function of the actual product. I think one thing I've learned in my career is it's not that women are not interested in technology. I get sent a lot of wearables from every single company that is making a wearable, and they always ask me to test it in private, early stage product, give them honest feedback from a female perspective. And what's interesting, sometimes I share that with some of my female friends or with my male friends. Men are very quick, they open the product, they start wearing it, or they immediately start using it. Women put it in the handbag, I don't hear from them for a month. I'm like, hey, have you used that product yet? No, I haven't set it up yet. Haven't had the time. Bit like you and your Oura ring. It's like, it's pretty easy. You can do it in like less than 2 minutes. You can set this up. But anyway, so it's not that we're not interested in it, or it's not, but we haven't, because again, from the beginning, when you're young, products have not been created for us. So it's not a natural way for us to interact. And then when the app is a bit clunky and the user journey doesn't really work, doesn't really tell us anything, we lose interest. So you see a huge abandon rate for women with that. You know, when I would say over-gendering and real lack of use case. I mean, there's been great products, right? And well, I wouldn't call any of them great, but Ringly was a product that failed because it just counted steps and it looked like a big ring on your finger. I mean, and then there was the product, what was it called, Bella Bead, which is just also a product. You know, I actually tested that product. I told both the founders at that point, you cannot sell this product to people. It doesn't work. The tech sucks. The sensors is terrible. Everything is bad here because I matched it up to an Apple Watch. And, you know, they still went to market, still sold the product, which was unbelievable. But I think because we've had those examples in the market, a lot of women are also like remembering that because you also have your first movers, right, within this space. So yeah, sadly, I think that's some of the stuff that hasn't worked.
So I'm going to talk about something actually on the pharma side, touching also on what Nikta said earlier, also about women's sexual health and how that has been not a priority ever, really. It's been interesting to watch the conversation about like a female Viagra equivalent development, and I mean I believe there's one on the market now, but I mean the improvement effect size of that compared to Viagra is still kind of like
Moderate.
Yeah, but it's like it took so many years to get through this and so many trials, and they're like, oh, well, we have this one, and then you don't hear anymore in development, and it's just like, oh, well, there you go, there's this one, and then meanwhile, you know, men have like
Sorted.
Yeah, meanwhile, men have all these ones. You can go down to the any store and buy it, and it's just like, just like there's kind of a dehumanizing vibe to how low priority our sexual health and pleasure is.
But I think that's also part of because we're not making a priority, neither for ourselves nor we're not speaking out about it.
Right. I mean, yeah. Also, that is very true.
Right now.
Well, we're on it. So.
Yeah. I mean, we've been conditioned not to in a way, but yeah, you're true. But yeah, that's something interesting that I've observed, that it's sort of like a failure or just like a kind of mediocre thing that was put out, and just kind of there you go.
Addendum to that would be male birth control.
Oh, yeah, I've thought about saying that, yeah.
But mine is also a pharma example. And I will say, in the ovarian aging space, like there were very few scientists in the world working on this problem when we started. And now there's a whole community. Like, we built a community. There's hundreds of people working on this. It's amazing. Like, there's discoveries being made. There's papers being published. It's a positive message. But there are very few, if any, companies that are doing anything that could be in the future something that would modulate ovarian aging, because we still are missing that discovery science. But there were a few. And one of them was called Oviva Therapeutics, and they were developing a recombinant AMH. Doesn't matter what it is. What I will say is that they had an exceptional team based on incredible science, with a great business plan, and they still failed to raise an A, and that asset has now been sold and the company is gone. And that's a tragedy, because all the solutions we have right now, especially for women at middle age and beyond, are Band-Aids. They are not going to move the needle. And so, and why did the company fail? It failed because first-time female founder, and it was about women's health. And I don't know how to make the case more impactful. Like, there's no reason not to invest in these kinds of companies, and it's a tragedy when these companies fail.
I hear you, and I think there's not many outlets that we can actually, talk about this now. I mean, because I know that basically every conference on women's health, or that has some sort of women's health component, I always see Jennifer, and I'm very happy about that. But you're one of the very few. And I wish there were more who would actually talk about this. So on that happy note, or otherwise, I shall release my panel. Thank you very much for joining me.
Thank you.